What's up, everybody? I'm Roadblock. This is a Raid Shadow Legends video, and as you can see, I'm not alone. I'm actually joined by Bront CatHerder here. Very excited to do this. We've been trying to do this for a little while. How you doing, Bront?
Pretty good. It's been a fun new year. We've got the Alice stuff coming, and definitely interesting challenges in raid and outside of raid as well. I know you're getting over your move and doing some of that stuff too. So good to have you back and making content as well. So yeah, it's been a while. We've been talking about this since what, October, November, I think
Yeah.
maybe. So it's been a while. Good to actually get this whirling. So.
Yep. I'm very excited. This is one of the first ones. I remember way back when I was reaching out. I was just like, man, I really like this guy's content. I want to reach out. I think we'll get along really well and have some good videos. So, but what we'll be talking about today. So we are going to be talking about some of what we view as kind of the most overrated champions in Raid Shadow Legends. So, I kind of limited my list to just ones that I have on my account, or maybe I have a personal story about why I feel like they're overrated. And yeah, that's what we're here to talk about. So, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first? What you thinking, Bront?
I can certainly take the reins here and go first, and I'm going to call out one that to this day people still tell me is a good solo champion, and I guess he kind of works for progression. But I was really disappointed by Ornn from
Oh,
the Sylvan
okay.
Watchers, and it's not that he is a horrible champion. I just think that people went absolutely nuts over, oh boy, it's an accessible solo champion, and he is super slow, and he is just not particularly exciting. And maybe it's just where my account is, where I never needed him, and I know I didn't need him at the time, but it's like I built him for content to solo, and it's like, oh cool, I can use him, we can try to get through some of this content. And I built two of them thinking he was going to be good for things like Centranos and for faction wars back when I didn't have a lot of Sylvan Watchers. Just did not work out at all. I ended up having to pull one of them out because the biggest problem with it he has is he doesn't have a 100% poison on that A3. I think it's a 50% chance books to a 75% chance, and the poison sensitivity. So far too often I found I either wouldn't get the poison sensitivity or I wouldn't get the other poisons. His A2 only activates a singular poison per hit, and then his A1 has such a low chance of putting more poisons up there. It's not that he can't do the job, and particularly because with his passive, he does at least get super tanky. So from that end, if you build him in the right gear, he's tanky. But there are so many champions that do this poison thing better, even at the epic levels. Although to be fair, some of them are, void epics. But I just found him to be very meh. In fact,
Yeah.
I think I'd rather run like a UDK and a toxic set than I would run Ornn, really. I think it's not only a safer bet, but a better bet.
So I agree. I also have two built, but they're only 50 on my account for faction wars because I got him very early in the Sylvan Watcher when it was a new faction.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I've never been really impressed. I'm not a big solo champion guy, to be completely honest. I know that that's probably not the best, the most efficient way to play, but I tend to like the really fast teams over, one solo guy. But I've never, he was going to be on my list. I actually considered heavily putting him on there. I was afraid I might get a lot of heat for it. So I kind of,
Well, I'll take the heat for you then.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
and again, it's one of these things too, where it's not that these champions are bad necessarily too. It's one of these things that, like, value over replacement. I felt there's better replacements for them, and at least in a lot of my list. Or in some cases, it's just a matter of the results I got were not the results I was expecting because of the hype around them. That's what
yeah.
overrated is really.
Absolutely. And I completely agree. And I think we're going to run into a lot of champions kind of in that level.
Hmm.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think Ornn definitely a little overrated for sure. So we'll move on. We'll go with mine next here. And this one, speaking of hot takes, I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this one. I'm probably gonna get flack from you as well. Um I'm gonna go with Frozen Banshee. So look, she's good, right? And we talked about it just a little. You touched on it just now. I'm not saying she's a bad champion. She is good for what she does. But something I see, and I don't know if you see this too, but I do a lot of account takeovers. I know you do as well.
Mhm.
And what I often see is people that are struggling to hit damage requirements running Frozen Banshee, but they're sitting on the bench better champions that will do more damage, bring more value to the team. Maybe they bring more debuffs or more buffs while also bringing more damage, and it's just something where I see a lot of people try to force her in because some video somewhere said that she's the queen of clan boss, which she is, but um I just think that she is good if you need her, but don't be afraid to move on from someone like Frozen Banshee and bring, a better damage dealer, a legendary, an epic, something that you've really kind of could put out more damage than what she can do.
Yeah, I actually kind of agree with that. I think the trick with Frozen Banshee to get the most out of her is you need to figure out how to get her to use her A1 more often than just every time she takes a turn, which means you need ally attack or counter attack, or both if you can manage to get them both in a clan boss team. And if you can do that, that brings enough extra damage that she then becomes a very viable option. But yeah, if you're talking about for clan boss, there are better options than Frozen Banshee in most cases. It really does depend on how much damage you're dealing with and what your goals are as well. Because sometimes too, Frozen Banshee's in there because she's a rare, so at least you're using the rare in clan boss. And if it's a two key, whether or not I have Frozen Banshee or a better champion, I might as well use Frozen Banshee for the stuff too. So from that
Mm-hmm.
end, she can be useful. But yeah, replacing Frozen Banshee can be helpful. People that try to use her as the solo champion for Dragon is a very common strategy that I've seen. And sometimes she's great and sometimes she's not, particularly against like 25, or I think she's actually bad affinity. It's not a particularly good option. She's also squishy because she's a rare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of people that play up Frozen Banshee as the answer, and that's actually kind of where I think a lot of these champions are going to fall in my end too, is that they're an answer, but they're not the end all be all answer. And I think people are there's so much hype around them that they kind of think maybe I need to use this champion specifically and don't look in places where there can be better options.
Mm-hmm. I built her twice, both on my free to play and my main account, and both times she was on the bench within a week or two. I there's you probably have somebody better is kind of the way I feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually got her in a one key Helicath clan boss team on my alt, actually, but I was using Fat Man and Kreela the Watcher, so I had double
Mm-hmm.
ally attack in that team. Plus, she had a revenge ring on, I believe, as well, and that is three extra, basically sets of two poisons on the boss. That made her super viable. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
not going to be the case for people that don't have that type of build.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and what do we got for your number two?
All right. Talk about taking flack. Ghostborn.
Ooh,
I
Ghostborn.
I have not been particularly thrilled with Ghostborn, and this goes way, way back. Ghostborn was the second legendary I pulled on my main account. I got Zavia first, then I got Ghostborn, then I got two other champions, then I got another Zavia, then I pulled about 20 more champions, then I got a third Zavia. And for some reason, I just pulled Zavias. It was pretty funny. But Ghostborn, good. I mean, he's a good champion. And when I got him, he was kind of helpful. But what I found is that I already had a Tyrell built.
Mm-hmm.
Tyrell was more helpful in every other facet of the game than Ghostborn was, because he brought the decrease attack, because he brought the stun for the waves, and I felt that yes, it was nice to not have to build accuracy and have the irresistible A3. It's nice to have the increased attack, but I had increased attack with other champions I was able to bring anyway. I needed to build accuracy to do anything else with him as well. His damage, while decent, was not super amazing. And I just found overall that the irresistible part of his kit wasn't useful for me anywhere.
Hmm.
Where at the time he was like the guy for speed runs. And I think part of it was also because the way his cooldowns worked, you didn't have to program him specially back when you could only program for the single floor and you had to just let it run. And I think that's part of why he was more overhyped than what I was looking at. But by the time I got him shortly afterwards, we had the three floor unlocked, so you could do all three floor different settings. And I got Lydia, and I had a what's her
Hmm.
name, Venus as well. And both of them were just so much more valuable. And what you'll always hear with the Ghostborn fans was the Irresistible is great, and he brings a buff. But for Seer teams, Lydia brought two buffs, which was all the extra damage, and she brought weaken and decreased defense. And if your Seer was built well enough, you only needed one of those two to probably wipe the waves anyway. So I just found that I never needed the extra reliability that Ghostborn supposedly brought, and everything else about his kit is okay. Yeah, not
Yeah.
a bad champion. It's just I think he's a combination of being power creeped a little bit and just not really as good as he could be. Maybe he's just a product of the times. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
I mean, just looking at the kit, I it doesn't really stand out to me. You know, like it feels kind of like an epic kit, if I'm being honest. Although this is interesting that it is some damage based on speed, but you know, I don't think that's enough to really bring out the power of a champion. It just feels a little underwhelming. Just you know, looking at it from a um because I've never used them, so
Mhm.
but I can
Yeah.
see it for sure. It definitely looked to me like a champion that could benefit from a rework or a buff for sure. So
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the thing that people did like about it is in Fire Knight, for example, where he was used for speed running back in Fire Knight 20 and 25, the A1 having decreased defense as well meant that he would regularly land decreased defense with that as well. If you built him with accuracy, which of course kind of defeated half the purpose of his kit was you didn't need accuracy in the first place. So,
yeah,
plus he's got an accuracy aura, which is kind of weird for somebody who doesn't need the accuracy either. It's just it's a faction crypts one, so I guess it's not that exciting, but still, you
yeah.
know.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm not familiar with him, so that was a good one. I definitely agree. That's not one. Not too impressed there. All right, so we'll move on now to my number two, and I don't know that I'll get as much flack for this one, but it's possible. I'm gonna go with Husk actually. So you know, like I said, some of these I have like personal stories behind. So when I was before I even started making content, I was trying to develop Hydra teams. I went with Husk. I've always found that this, his A2, which was the enemy max HP damage, it never hit as hard as I wanted it to. I was always underwhelmed. And then the other value was the perceived provoke that you would get from him, right? But it's such a low percent chance of landing. And if that's your only provoker, and you're a low level account, under geared, you know, this isn't really going to live up to what you're looking for, right? You really need to still bring another provoker or maybe some other debuffs or damage or something. He never filled the you know the one trick pony that I feel like he's been built up to be, if you just look at his kit. So I actually he was I think the first epic I pulled on my free to play account, and I remember in one of my videos, one of my recordings, I basically said, like, you know, I'm not going to 6-star Husk because I might pull Geomancer. And then a few days later, I pulled Geomancer, and, you know, I was vindicated. And he is still level 50 over on my free to play. So, yeah, I've always been unimpressed by him. But what are your thoughts on Husk?
Well, Husk is a weird one because for me, even before Hydra, I looked at Husk and said, why don't more people talk about his kit? And but that's again before Hydra, but that has more to do with his A2 having a 60% chance to stun.
Mm-hmm.
In Faction Wars, he's almost a god because even if he's a weak against the Valkyries, the fact that he's got a 60% chance of stun, you only need to get through that once if you're really struggling for it. You get enough of those 60% stuns to land, the Valkyrie wave is actually suddenly super easy.
Hmm.
So that in of itself is pretty big. He's also useful against the boss because again, max HP hit will do a decent amount of damage against that boss. The knock against him, where you're talking about damage, he's got the worst max HP multipliers. I think most max HP multipliers are like a zero point 0.1 of the max HP. His is a zero point 0.5 or 0.05. So he
Oh yeah.
actually does half as much damage as Royal Guard before building up other damage in other ways for that. So he needs more crit damage. So that's part of why the damage on Hydra wasn't as good. And then yeah, that provoke is not amazingly reliable, although I can tell you from dealing with other content creators that were big into the Hydra at the time, how they would prefer Husk over champions like Bivald, who I think is, I'm not he's not on my underrated list that we're probably going to do on our channel later, but um, his A1 provoke, they liked it better than Bivald because while it's only like a 35 or 40% chance to land, the double hit 40% chance made it feel a lot better overall and more reliable than a single hit 50% chance on that A1 for Bivald, for example.
Hmm.
And he does decent damage, but you also need to be, that's the other thing I think a lot of people were disappointed with Husk is he's a max HP hitter. Max HP hitters need to be doing hard or higher, probably brutal or better. If you're doing max HP on normal, you're almost better off just being a straight damage dealer because the normal Hydras have so little HP. So max
Yeah.
HP hitters just don't work as well on normal Hydra. And I think that's actually very confusing for new players as well.
Hmm.
But I think it's a good call out because it's actually, you and I are talking about the different perspective of where he might be over or underrated.
Hmm.
But yeah, for Hydra, I can see why he might be considered overrated. And depending on the situation in the team, yeah, he's not going to be your only provoker, but he's good as a secondary provoker. He's not going to be your only damage dealer, but he's good as another damage dealer because of that max HP AoE.
Hmm.
So he's not a standalone going to carry your team champ. Like I think maybe he was billed as that for this All Star, but he's also a team that can be valuable depending on where you are in Hydra.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I can definitely see him having his heyday, and especially because there are a lot fewer provokers back in the day. Now we have a lot more, and so it's just one of those things that even on my free to play, I ended. He's going to be in another video later, but I've pulled some other provokers that have really stepped up and were able to fill that role for me. So, but I do love him in Faction Wars. You are correct that AOE stun is very very valuable, and yeah. So, you ready to move on to your next one?
Yep. And this is going to be a weird one because this is not a specific champion. It's actually going to cover. It probably covers about 15 to 20 champions.
Okay.
But um, here, I can't tell you how many times I've seen other content creators, and to be fair, I probably would do the same thing if I had some of these options too, talking about how much damage so and so epic or so and so legendary or even so and so mythical in a couple of cases does, and they're sporting 6-star crushing rend.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that 6-star crushing rend is overrated. It's that what happens is you have champions like Oboro. People were talking about how Oboro is absolutely broken with Mikage, but she's only broken with Mikage if you have 6-star crushing rend, because she does not do enough damage without that 6-star crushing rend to make her value over replacement for a lot of other teams. Whisper, although Whisper does a ton of damage anyway, I understand that she's actually really good, but Whisper has fallen off unless you get a 6-star crushing rend. In fact, I recently got Toshiro and did a video on Toshiro, and I was both impressed by the amount of damage he did and depressed by the fact that I couldn't get these monstrous numbers that other people in my clan were getting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I looked at the build and it's like, oh, he's got 6-star crushing rend on Toshiro. Of course I can't get that much. I've got no blessing on him of any kind whatsoever. And, it doesn't mean that these champions aren't good. It doesn't mean they can't be great. But I think that there's a lot of people that look at a champion, look at somebody hyping them, and don't realize that you need 6-star crushing rend to do what these ridiculous numbers are actually doing. And I think it's unfortunate, especially for newer players that don't have these 6-star epic souls even. It's just it's very frustrating when you can't get what you're expecting to, especially if you aren't in the position where I am, or maybe you are, where we can afford to. Oops, I maxed an epic out. That's not going to help my count. Oh well. These newer players that might max an epic out because, oh boy, they said this epic is amazing, and they're not doing anything like what I thought they were going to do. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
very frustrating.
that's such a great take. I think that's exactly what I'm like, what this video and what,
Hmm.
what I was looking for out of this conversation is that exact concept that there are, like, we talked about Frozen Banshee, or or any of them. If you put them in monster gear, yeah, they're gonna do crazy good. But for the newer player, the average player, um, you know, these videos are great. They're fun to watch. I love them. I watch them all. I wish I had those 6-star souls.
Hmm.
But it's very, very true that if you don't have the right level of gear, that you may not get the same performance that you're seeing in those videos. And there's like you said, if I had the gear, I'd be doing it too.
Yeah,
But
and specifically the souls are really the big call out because crushing rend at 6-star, and I don't know if you could pull up a soul or not. The difference between 5-star and 6-star crushing rend is huge because crushing rend is 1% of the at 6-star at least is 1% of the defense ignored every 10 levels at 6-star. It's one every 25 on the 5-star. So it's more than twice as effective between a 5-star and a 6-star. Plus, the 6-star is the only one that lets you ignore it on every hit,
yep,
whereas everything else before it, it's one hit or maybe two hits. So for like a seer, for example, crushing rend makes sense because you want seer to wave clear once, hit the waves, you're done. And a couple of other champions, you might throw crushing rend, so it doesn't need to be 6-star on her. If it is obviously that's great. But for Hydra champions, the first hit being able to do a ton of damage doesn't help me that much because I'm going to be doing,
yeah,
75 attacks. I need to do that extra ignore defense on every attack. So there's so many other better blessings. And again, that ignore 31% defense, I think, on the Hydra and Nightmare, for example, makes a huge difference on any champion. So yeah, but yeah, gear too can certainly be a thing. And I always try to preface it, and I'm sure you do as well, that my gear might be better than yours. So your results may vary, or the level you're attacking
hmm
may vary well, because we can certainly try to build them down per se, but honestly, I don't think building them down does a lot of value to the people looking at it either, because they want to see what on your account, what you're judging it against other champions on your account.
yep, yeah. I try to make that same distinction. Like, I recently did a video about Chimera, and my Acrizia was in it. She's in 9-piece Merciless. Like, not everybody has that. I barely have it. I only have that on 2 factions. Just lucky enough that it's on dwarves. But yeah, I like I said before, and I know I kind of went into the gear in my head there, but I did mean blessings. Yeah,
Oh
I
yeah. Well, no, I
it's
mean it's a good comparison as well. That sometimes you do have to pay attention to the gear on these champions too.
Yep,
So
absolutely. Well, let me jump back into my third pick here. I actually skipped over him because he has a similar name to Husk, and it's Vrask.
mm,
Um, Now, I don't. I don't know that I'm gonna get too much heat for this one. I have some hot takes coming up here, but my issue with Vrask is that and feel free to let me know, because he's an old school champion and one that I did build on this account, but I never got the value out of him. Um, because I don't know that I'm ever wanting heals as much. Um, these days, right? I feel pretty confident. Even like Chimera, my only healer on my Chimera team is a leech, right? That's all that I really use, other than like maybe some continuous heals from Duchess or something. But so I never found a use for him, but every time he would be pulled in a video or a conversation about the orcs would come up, I would always hear his name. And I personally never found the value because to me, it feels like the only thing he really seems to do is heal. So feel free to let me know if I'm
No,
wrong.
I mean that's his kit. He's a one-trick pony and he's a healer. But what part of the reason that people were high on him for a while, and I know when I did faction wars, I needed him, and he was key to my faction wars. But that had a lot to do with the fact that the orcs had almost no healing of any kind a couple years ago.
Hmm.
Now that's improved a little bit. You've got like a Tagore right now who brings some shields and a better revive and some healing. You had a little bit of it with Jorg, Old Hermit, but that was pretty much it. Now you've got Tila bring some healing. You've got you've got a legendary reviver in a couple of other champions as well. You've got all kinds of other options. Plus, once your gear is good enough, you no longer need the healing. What he was really good for was the I want to get through faction wars, and my champions aren't good enough to basically one shot everything. So I need the healing to keep everyone alive. The other trick with him, if you go look into his kit of Rask, is his A1 gives him a 20% turn meter fill when he uses his A1. So you actually want to shut off his A2
Yeah.
because you're not using him for damage. Yes, his A2 does 15% more damage or some more damage. I don't remember because the multipliers are there. But you literally want the extra turn meter because you want him hitting and then healing everybody as often as possible. And that is actually, if you can get him at about 200-ish speed and get him to, and because he's got a huge HP for an epic, and I
Hmm.
mean 23k is huge for an epic, you can get him at 100k HP. You can get him at 80k HP at a 5-star. And if you can get him around 200 speed, and then you shut off everything but that A1, yeah, he's doing okay-ish damage because his damage based off of HP, and he's got a crit anyway. But overall, he's healing what, like, you know, it's 10% of his HP. So he's healing, if he's got 80k HP, he's healing 8,000 per hit. And if he's going often enough at a 2-to-1 ratio, he can basically keep your entire team almost entirely topped off by himself.
Hmm.
But it's a very specific, you build that. It's one of the few cases where you might want HP gloves that happen to have a lot of crit rate and crit damage on them rather than crit damage gloves because you definitely don't need the damage, or crit rate gloves if you can avoid it because you want that extra HP for the healing. And, is he good for that one scenario? Yeah. Are there now better options available in epics? Yeah, totally. The other place he was really good in was the Eternal Dragon. The Isn't the Eternal? It's the Immortal Dragon, the
Yeah.
one that can lock you out, because it is so easy to die on that lockout. But since his A1 does exactly what you want him to do because it's all passive, he can basically keep you alive by healing you in a heavy damage boss.
Hmm.
So for some early progression, that was the other place that he was really kind of critical for. But yeah, I think as much as anything, he's a victim of overall power creep.
Yep.
But I've still, for faction wars, done takeovers where I've built a Vrask, and that was the key to winning.
Hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. No, I can see that. I can see that being good. As a support in faction wars. Um, but yeah, like I said, for me
Mhm.
personally, it's always been a challenge. I built him wanting him to be a big healer for me, and again, early roadblock. I
Yeah.
wasn't the best, the most knowledgeable player. I watched a video, said, "Hey, Vrask is good," and I just put my gear on him and said, "Go," and it was underwhelming. But I do see the value there for sure.
Yeah, and I think the biggest problem is you do need to make him like stupid fast, or at least as stupid fast as you can on your account to get value out of him. So especially, and I say early roadblock, if you were early roadblock not putting speed boots on all your champions early roadblock, because I think we've all been there before. That is a huge mistake for him too, because his base speed is absolutely atrocious at
Yeah.
97. So,
Yep. All right, let's
all
go
right.
with, yeah. What's your next one? What do we got?
I don't know if this is going to be a hot take or not, but I have never been really particularly fond of Foley.
Ooh, okay.
And my account was all about the Dark Elves. I was done with my Dark Elves faction guardians before I got faction guardians in almost any other faction. It was absolutely nuts. In fact, I think there were two factions I had never pulled legendaries for before I filled up my faction guardians in this. So I had almost every Dark Elf known to man. And I think that some of this is probably just a sign of the times for him, but um, he just doesn't do a lot of damage. His multipliers are just they never have been particularly great. But they when they weren't great for a while, they weren't great, but you could find ways to boost him up, and there weren't a lot of ways to do block revive, and he was one of the few champions you had trouble locking out because of his passive.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, everyone's putting stone skin on their champions, so you don't have to worry about getting locked out in most cases unless somebody can strip that off as well. You've got so many champions that are super tanky that are defense-based nukers or HP-based nukers that have damage mitigation. And his block revive is really only good on that A3. And part of the other thing that he was really good at was he was the Rotos counter from a perspective of he had the double hitter on all of his attacks or more, because I think his other one's a four hitter and his A1's a four hitter. So he can go through Rodos's passive if you can hit him with that AoE where he hits the first person once and then he attacks somebody else a second time. And yeah, that can hit Rotos, but now Rotos has ways to take that as well. But even back in the day, I just never found that his damage was really that great. And even then, I've had to build him for Centranos, where I now have significantly better gear.
Mm-hmm.
And he's squishy. He just doesn't hit particularly hard. His multipliers are just kind of okay. And he's an affinity champion, which means he's also weak against a quarter of all the champions he's going to run across anyway, too. So I just never have been a big Foley fan.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I've never pulled him on either account or any of my accounts, I should say. I've run into him a few times, and I have run into a handful of ones that are they've done a job against me. But on my
Mm-hmm.
main account, I have go second teams, all stone skin. Not really scared of a Foley on any of those teams. I will say, especially for an early game player right now, if you were to pull Foley early, I would say that he would be a very valuable pull. Um, you're going to run into a lot of Armands, right? So not being stunned is going to be helpful there. Um, Block revive, you're going to run into a lot of Sun Wukong. It's going to
Yep.
be helpful there. But he definitely is going to fall off as you get further up high. Because anytime I'm looking through Arena and I see a Foley, I'm not scared at all. I'm like, oh, they have a Foley. I'll be fine. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's your main damage dealer, you're really looking for more out of damage dealers these days. I had quite a few that almost made the list because they just did damage, and that but where's your ignore stone skin? Where's your ignoring defense built into the kit? Like where's those mechanics? So I see where you're coming from with that one.
Yeah, and I mean, he said he's got a couple uses, and to be fair, since things have moved in towards the stuns, you do have to be careful if you have a stun team when you go into a Foley team. But it's not like most teams can recover from a Foley, even if he does manage to block revive somebody, just the way modern teams have been built nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, so let's move on. We're gonna go to my fourth one here.
Right.
I This is probably the spiciest take, and I want to I want to pre-defend myself a little bit, because I'm not saying that this champion is bad. This champion is great, amazing, good in so many areas of the game. But something that I come across so much when I'm doing account takeovers or just chatting with people in my Discord or comments or whatever, people are so afraid of this guy, and he's not unbeatable. It's UDK. I think that players, especially at a lower level, before Stone Skin, I so many times I see people being so scared. Oh, well, they have an Ultimate Death Knight. I can't beat that team. And this is usually it's a conversation about, well, what's your gear look like? What are your speeds, and do you have mitigation? Do you have crowd control? Do you have double hitters? Right? There are ways
Yep.
to beat this guy, and I don't think that everyone needs to be so scared of him. Do I still use him at my level of arena in Stone Skin super slow build? Yes, I do, and I know that nuke UDKs have been a rising thing in the arena
Yep.
as well, but I think people put him on a bit of a pedestal, especially newer players that maybe don't understand that while he has his strengths and most traditional teams play into those strengths, he also has his weaknesses, and you just maybe do a quick adjustment on your team, or change some things up, and you can definitely beat a UDK.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from, and I think it's more. Yeah, I think you're saying more of an issue of it's not that he's overrated as much as he's feared more than he needs to be because people don't understand him, and I
Yep.
think that's really true. The AOEing around him is often the easy solution. Especially eventually you will get ways to ignore Stone Skin because there's now several champions that can ignore Stone Skin, so that becomes a way to get around him as well. At the same time, he is an absolute hard counter for most Rhodoses,
Yes.
which makes him absolutely amazing. And if the only reason you're doing as well as you are in Arena is because you have a Rhodos, well, then yeah, I understand why you might not really like
Yep.
UDK. So, and but that really is the thing of where finding ways to get around him. And as you said, ally attackers. Well, you got a Rhodos, bring an ally attacker, and then just attack around him.
Yep. Bombs. You know,
So,
I like Fenax. I use him a lot into UDK.
mhm.
Well, I think that works. Hold on, let me make sure. Is my math right? You're the more knowledgeable guy.
Yeah.
Fenax is a one who'll
Oh,
go through it, right?
he doesn't go through a stone skin, but he's got a two hitter. It's
The
conditional.
second hit,
But the
yes.
second hit can go through. Yeah.
Okay, yes, that's what I meant. Okay, I just wanted to double check my math
In
there.
fact, on my alt, I've got Mezamel, and
Me too. Yeah.
Mezamel is fun, but it is amusing how often I will double hit forgetting there's a UDK and still kill the person I'm aiming for because she now hit now, especially after the buff. Before the buff, that was never happened. After the buff, she's hitting through that. But I've actually been surprised, and I guess it depends on who I'm dealing with. I've actually had her double kill a UDK and somebody else at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
which is often kind of a fun way to deal with it as well.
For
But yeah, like I've got a Narcissus team that's got an ally attack in it, and very much I'll just kind of like, okay, so the first person that hits him is going to hit UDK, and everyone else will kill whoever I'm looking for. Boom, we're done. The other thing that he does get paired with, you've got Mordo Macabre here. Mordo Macabre has the double hitter that can sometimes kill UDK and somebody else. That's a lot of fun.
mm-hmm.
But it's amusingly enough, I also see people that fear Mordo Macabre and will fear a UDK Mordo Macabre team. And oftentimes I find a UDK Mordo Macabre team is actually not that great because literally Mordo Macabre's not getting any of the hits that he needs to trigger his passive because UDK is absorbing them all. So,
So, that would be one of my favorite teams to run, actually. But
I
I
mean,
do hear you.
It can work. And to be fair, you don't have Duchess on there too, because the third one I've seen is a Duchess UDK
Yeah.
Mordu team. And I'm like, no, no, you just too many ways you're trying to avoid Mordu. Don't do that.
Yep.
That's not nice.
This is my main team, and the whole concept here is just to help the rest of them tend to survive a little bit more.
Mhm.
I wouldn't run him into single target, like I wouldn't do the more two, and then I have the Harima for backup. But I do hear what you're saying, and I've had
Yeah.
that criticism on my account before, like those are counterintuitive. I'm like, I do know that, but I'd rather more two get hit by 1 second hit of a hard hitting ability than get hit by both. But yeah, he's a very good champion, powerful if used right, but a lot of players in the lower levels that I've done takeovers on, and people that have commented in the Discord, kind of like I said, they're putting him on that pedestal, and I think that that he is great. I'm like I
Mhm.
I want to be clear because I'm going to get so much hate, but Not impossible. Bombs too. We don't think we mentioned bombs, but a stone skin UDK. That's my favorite way. I have.
Yeah.
I actually have two of the things that you mentioned in my main arena team right now. Um, is this one right here, and I use both Mezimel and bombs. Sorry, that's not my main team. It is this one. So, bombs and getting around him with Mezimel's hit as well. So,
And for
um,
reference, don't run this team against that particular team. Do not run bomb champions against
no, 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 no,
RHF.
no. I'm just picking. Here, where we go?
But yeah,
Better,
yeah.
better with this one. There you go. So, okay, well let's because I don't want the we're getting pushed for time here, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. Let's move on to the fourth one. Or is it your fourth one now? It
It's
should
my
be.
fifth one, and
Oh, fifth one.
this
Okay.
one actually should be pretty similar because this has got a similar problem to Foley, and that is candy.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, and this is actually one I talked with Colred about a little bit. We were talking about champions in general, and actually he mentioned he pulled a candy and never built him because he never found the right team for it. And Candy is one of these nukers that everyone says, oh, he's an amazing nuker. He's a top tier nuker. Candy is super conditional, and you need a Duchess or a Veil champion or some other way to set him up because he gets the extra damage from having the Veil with his passive.
Hmm.
So without a Veil on and the increased attack from a Duchess or the increased attack from his passive, he's doing 40% less damage effectively. Plus, he's unfortunately probably the weakest nuker affinity in the arena right now in Force
Hmm.
because there are so many. I mean, there's obviously a lot of Magic champions, but there's an awful lot of Spirit support champions that are super powerful. You've got your Creexias, I think your Lazarius is Magic, but I mean, there's obviously they're mythicals, but you've got Duchess is honestly one of the big ones. Duchess on the other team, Duchess veils her team. Candy is almost ineffective because he has trouble getting through a Duchess, and he needs to be able to get through a Duchess on those A1s to be able to do something else. Now, that double hitter on that A1 is still one of the biggest nukes in the game on an A1 because it has that extra hit if the enemy is under a buff. But the part of the problem also is that if that buff is a shield, he'll knock the shield off, and then he won't get the second attack. I've actually seen that be kind of interesting. I've also seen him be countered by UDK, as we just brought up UDK, where you move in to attack somebody, that person doesn't have a buff. He attacks UDK, doesn't get a second attack, so he doesn't attack the person you're wanting to with that second attack, even though UDK has the buff either. So weirdness about how that gets triggered as well.
Hmm.
And that's not to say he doesn't do a ton of damage. He does a decent amount of damage, but it's probably a matter of his kit's just kind of old. The affinity really could use some boosting in some way, shape, or form. And I think honestly, if we got slightly more magic support champions or force support champions that are powerful, and to be fair, there are several force support champions that are powerful. He's certainly effective against them, but he's just overall, I've just found him even in his prime when I was using him, it was just like he's the team I can't wait to get rid of on my 3v3 defense because he's the least effective of any of the game people I have here. And even on my alt, where I was running him for a while with a Duchess because it was the team I could run, I ended up finding I needed to run him with a second nuker because he just wasn't doing enough damage.
Oh
So
wow. Yeah.
it was like UDK, Duchess, and then I think I had Supreme Elhane and Candrafon. And I eventually pulled Candrafon out of the team because Candrafon was the liability.
Hmm. Yeah. I've never pulled him, but what I will say is I'm not scared of him. Right?
Mhm.
I go into the arena. If Candy Franz, I always call him Candy Fron because we call him Candy for
Yeah.
short. But anytime Candy's on the other team, I'm not scared. You see Terras, Marishka, you pause, right? Same thing with Narcissus. Okay, do I have the right team to go against this? But if Candifron's in there, usually I'm just like, I'm Stone Skin, I'm good. I'm not afraid of him. Even with teams that don't have Stone Skin, he doesn't really, I feel like, bring enough to the table in the current meta, at least at my level, to really be afraid of him. So yeah, I agree. A lot of people love him. I know he's an old school champion, but not as scary to me these days.
Yep.
Okay. So this is my last one, and this will be the hottest take. I know you're gonna disagree with me, um, on this one, but I'm just gonna go ahead and say who it is. It's Still of the Drakes. And I'll probably never be able to do a collab with Ash, because
Do I
I'm
shut my
com-
camera off? No.
but so I want to be clear. I don't think that Syl is bad. I think she's good, not great. And one thing that I'm gonna say to a lot of free to play players that have been playing, or old school players that have been playing for a very very long time, the early game, I think, is a lot faster now. I know that you said recently you're doing the free to play challenge, right? Did you do
Mhm.
it last time?
No, I did not.
So last time, I mean, we had people getting Arbiter in 30 days. Like people are able to develop their accounts so much faster now that I think they really need, in my opinion, and I've said this before, need to move her up from 180 days to a little bit higher. Because by the time that you get her, and I've done a lot of different free to play playthroughs and things like that, by the time I get Syl on those accounts, I have other sources of healing, right? I have other revivers. Maybe they're epics, but I still have revivers. Um, I have other sources of decreased speed that are more consistent. I just personally think there is the stun, but even then, Armand's was a thing for a lot of the newer accounts. Who knows what new champion will come out in the future. Um, it's just I want to like her. I love her look. I will say that one of the coolest looking kits in my opinion, skins, especially the Lavaborn one. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, uh, she does not make the cut for me. So,
Well, that is definitely a hot take, and I'm actually going to use this opportunity to tease the video that we're going to be filming shortly after this on my account because
I think,
I may or may not have her on my list as underrated. So, but I mean, I get where you're coming from, and from a perspective of is she as important to you when you get her at day 180 as she was 2 years ago? I agree with that take. I think that she is not as important now as she used to be. And again, this is, I guess, probably where it's going to depend on what level you're playing. We're talking about people that are probably hardcore pushing their
yeah.
accounts as hard as possible. For people that are more casual, are just like, I'll log in once a day, I'll do my dailies, I'll get a couple of the things done, I'll push my account a little bit, and but I'm not going to sit here and grind and have this running in the background 24/7 or anything like that. And that's not to say anything wrong with anything either way, but people that are not doing that are not going to be getting Arbiter in day 30, day
Yeah.
60, day 90 necessarily either. And Syl is still a decent champion, even at day 180, even day whatever. I still use Syl quite a
Mhm.
bit. So so we'll go in some of the rationale of why I use her and why I think she's particularly good in my video, just to not scare too much for that, but that'll be kind
Yeah.
of interesting. But I get what you're saying too. You're not saying that she's a bad champion. You're saying that you think that it would be nice to get her earlier. And honestly,
Yeah.
I don't disagree, but that has a lot more to do with the fact that I think they need to revamp a lot of the login champions.
Mhm. Yeah.
You've got Lordly Legionary, who I doubt lousy Legionary, who just
Mhm.
needs to go away. Um, you've got was it Hate Flower? Tanix Hate Flower is not particularly great. She was one of those usable in emergency 3 years ago. Now she's not even usable. It's there's just so many champions there that are not particularly great. Dark Aethel, Yaga is a trap. I
Mhm.
hate Yaga actively.
Yeah.
He is just Yaga is a 60-day chicken. Really, your account is better off not having Yaga on it than than actually having it. So
I yeah, just I agree wholeheartedly that they
mhm.
really do, especially with how quick the game is progressing now. Because it's not just that you're able to try, or that the game is a little solved, and this is something I don't know if you ever played World of Warcraft or anything, but that was something that as the game got older, that it was kind of solved. Certain This is the strategy. This is what you do.
Mhm.
You just go in and you do this one really easy thing, and that boss is a nothing, right? And I feel like the game is a little bit more soft. Now, for the player that plays on their phone for a couple of minutes a day, never watched a YouTube video, never done anything, Syl is going to be so good for them. Absolutely. But like I've done many different free to play kind of series, and every time, by the time I get to Syl, she's really fallen off. And there are, I think, also to consider epic empowerment as well. So when you have other revivers like Rector Draft, but you could empower them, or even Tagore, who we're about to get in the free to play challenge, right? Being able to empower them and getting more value there. I think, and this also ties back into the Frozen Banshee thing just a little bit, where I do a lot of account takeovers, and I'm sure you're going to say the opposite of this, but I'll see them have Syl in there, and I'll ask them, well, what is her role in this team? And they'll say, well, she's my healer, right? It's like, well, what about this champion that has Leech and brings more damage? You're only about 10 million damage off from hitting max chest, but Syl's not bringing that damage value. Maybe bring in another healer, or maybe lose 1 or 2 turns but gain that 10 million damage that you need.
Mhm.
So a lot of it is also misuse of Syl as well, which, I honestly think that she is in the middle now, right? Some people overrate her, some people underrate her. I'm probably in the latter category. I think she really truthfully falls somewhere in the middle there. But the key, just like any of the champions that we've talked about, especially some of the legendaries, is that if you use them the right way, yes, but if you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole, you're going to come up short. And I think I see that a lot with Syl in particular.
Yeah, there's a lot of places where Syl is very viable and still very valuable in the game right now, which is, again, teasers for what I got to talk about. Um, but yeah, there are also plenty of places where people probably are relying on her when they shouldn't anymore. And I think that really is one of the progression limitations a lot of people have is early on, durability and endurance is key. As you progress in the game, it becomes a little more of a damage test and a ramping up of doing more damage because if you do enough damage, you don't need to bother healing.
Yeah.
So, um, but yeah, so I'm certainly excited to film that video though and talk with
Yes.
you about some of that stuff too. So,
Yeah.
been fun talking about this though. This has been fun. A lot of
Yeah,
interesting takes and
exactly.
it's a fun give and take, and I'm actually kind of happy we're not agreeing on everything either. So that's
Yes,
been good.
yes, and that's what I love about Raid is there's so many
Mhm.
different ways to look at things. But we're gonna wrap up this video a little bit longer. But thank you all for watching. Thank you for your support. We are gonna head over to Bront's channel and we're gonna record our most underrated champions. So please check that out. I'll pin that in the comment and put that in the description as well. But thank you all for watching. If you like my content, please consider subscribing. This is the best way to support my channel right now, and also give a subscribe over to Bront. He has a lot of very, very interesting takes. I wasn't expecting as spicy of takes as we got today. So thank you for bringing the spice, man. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.